There we go. Well, we mentioned that that he can't call into question all of his beliefs by this technique. And remember, Descartes is not insane, right? He's the inventor of analytic geometry, and probably in his real life, he doesn't doubt any more than you do that he's really sitting in a real room, and that he has a real body with hands and all. But he uses these skeptical arguments to at least cast a theoretical doubt. What we said last time, people referred to as a hyperbolic doubt on things. But again, he's convinced that even in a dream, things like 2 plus 3 or a square still equals 5, square still has 4 sides. And I mentioned that I have problems with this because of the way things seem to go in and out of existence in a dream. So how do you know that 2 plus 3 equals 5 if things are constantly going in and out of existence? And I'm not gonna, but so we saw that to question mathematical beliefs, he really kind of goes out on a limb and uses this literary device of an evil demon or an evil genius, constantly deceiving him about even mathematical beliefs. And I don't know, the way that I can kind of get a handle on this, and I think I mentioned this last time, is if you've ever, worked through a math problem, made a mistake somewhere along the way. I mean, think of some, evil character being there over your shoulder, causing you to constantly make mistakes in math and have false beliefs. So he now, again, he brings in the evil demon or the evil genius because he doesn't want to entertain, lest he get in trouble, the notion that God might be the source of this deception. Plus, he does need God to get him out of a jam later on, which he says, if we had a powerful enough creature, it could cause him to call into question all of his former beliefs, and even about whether he really has a body and hands. Because we're going to see that for Descartes, human beings are essentially an immaterial, immortal soul, and we possess a body. And so this is essentially where he goes. He's looking for, Descartes, unlike David Hume, who we're going to look at next when we study the British empiricist, Hume is proud to be a skeptic. I mean, he wants to be a skeptic. Descartes is only using skeptical arguments to try to sort through his beliefs and set aside all of them that he can raise even a way out in left field doubt about. And let's face it, I mean, this is a very unusual doubt. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking that a square has 4 sides. Some evil character could be over my shoulders, and he's convinced me all my life, or at least my adult life, as long as I've known they're squares, that they have 4 sides and they really have 5. I mean, it's kind of a weird, sort of thing. But he finally finds his Archimedean point. And So in other words, the point he's looking for is something that will suffice to be an axiom. It'll have the same, ability to ground things as Euclid's axioms. Like things equal to the same things or equal to one another. Shortest distance between 2 points in a straight line, stuff like that. And he thinks he finds it in the fact that even if he's being deceived about everything else, the one thing he can't be deceived about is that he's here to be deceived, or, and so the truth that he thinks is a fundamental truth that he can't doubt is the truth of his own existence. Now I'm really kind of reviewing a few of these things, but because I forget whether I put this on the recording. So if he's constantly being deceived, he can't doubt that he exists and he's around to be deceived. Or another way that people put this is that if he's doubting everything, the one thing he can't doubt is that he's here to do the doubting. So, as I said, in the Meditations, he says, the proposition or the statement, I am, I exist, is necessarily true every time I think it or pronounce it. That's the way he says it in the Meditations. In the Discourse on Method, he uses this famous phrase, which if you've heard anything about philosophy, you've probably heard cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And so there's this fundamental axiom. But you can say, well, wait a second. From Euclid's axioms, you can derive the whole system. How on earth where's he going to go from there? Because at this point, the only thing Descartes knows is that he exists. That's the only. In other words, that's the only thing he can defend philosophically. He can't philosophically defend the claim that an external world exists, that it's not dreaming after all, that mathematics is reliable, that there are other people in the world besides himself. There's a philosophical term for this, which is the view that we can know only the contents of our own minds, and the only thing we can know for sure is that we ourselves exist. It's known as solipsism. And the trick for Descartes here is to get himself out of solipsism. But first, one of the reasons why Descartes is studied, and especially in connection with things like mind-body problem, is he did a lot more to try to clarify what philosophers should mean by the claim that we're a dualistic entity, that we're an immaterial spirit in a material body, what the 20th century philosopher Gilbert Ryle sarcastically referred to as the ghost in the machine, the immaterial spirit or ghost in the machine of the material body. So he rejects Plato's definition of humans as rational animals, and partly because he doesn't think this is really clear, but what he does is he says, well, what did I think about the soul? And he says, I wasn't very clear, you know, I knew that it's where sense perception and thinking occur, and you know, by my will I can initiate bodily movements, and this is what gives rise to mind-body problems. In other words, mental events. You know, I could think I'm gonna lay this marker down and do it. You know, a mental event causes a physical event, right? Or if I were to, you know, hit my knee against this thing, a physical event can cause the mental event of having a pain. You know, we know commonsensically that that happens, but the trick is if matter and mind are what Descartes says they are, how do you account for this? Well, so here's the thing. What we remember Descartes for is that he did a lot more work on what the mind is supposed to be. He says he thought that the soul was like a wind or ether or fire, but he didn't have clear. But now he tries to get clearer, and note he says the body is a physical object, has shape. This is important. The body, or the modern philosophers use this term ambiguously. There's the body, right? Our bodies that do have these characteristics, but also they use the word body as a synonym for a material object, a material body. And here we're using it in a wider term of anything that's made of matter. In other words, these are properties that also relate to a material object, right? That you know, it's located in Newtonian space. We know that it occupies space to the exclusion of other bodies. Obviously, it's perceivable and capable of motion in space. Now, when you know, but it's these qualities that he thinks the evil demon can call into question. You know, so again, he Descartes is kind of going to turn on its head what we might believe. In other words, and really this is kind of the way people would have looked at it even in his own day. You might say, well, all right, I know I have a physical body, and it has various attributes. You know, I can see, feel, touch my body. You know, I know it's there. But whether or not I also possess an immortal, immaterial soul, even if you have, you know, a religious background that says that that's the case, you might say, well, I'm not quite as certain of that. It's not as obvious that I know that I am an immaterial soul as that I know that I have a body. In other words, that's what most of us, isn't it? I mean, most of us would think that the knowledge that we have a material body is a whole lot more reliable and certain than the knowledge that we are or have an immaterial soul, even if we believe that we do. But now Descartes is going to stand that on its head. Descartes is going to say, no, you know what? It's the attributes of the material body that the evil genius can call into question. But the attributes of the soul are known with more certainty than the attributes of the body, which is, of course, exactly the opposite of. So Descartes, and this is where some modern people who don't think we have a self out of community don't like this idea of our soul or self as being a self-contained individual entity. But this dates back a long way. So for Descartes, the number one property of an immaterial thing, and especially of our souls, is thought. And so he says, this is what I am essentially. Descartes says, I am a thing that thinks, or a thinking thing. And in other words, that he's a self-contained entity, and as an immaterial spirit, the chief property he has is the property of thought. Now, he expands upon what he means, and this is the kind of thing that Descartes did that sort of broke new ground. He says, well look, if we're going to talk about the immaterial spirit or mind, and he does not make a distinction between the soul and the mind, he says, this immaterial thing that I am has going on within it certain mental processes. I doubt. I mean, doubting is part of thinking. In other words, this is partly how he gets to I think, therefore I am. If I'm doubting everything else, or if an evil genius is causing me to doubt everything else, well, doubting is one aspect of thinking. So even if I'm doubting everything else, I still am thinking. I'm having a mental life. And understanding, affirming, or denying something, imagining something, having sense perceptions. We're going to see that the British empiricists talk a lot about these qualities. So Descartes then tries to get a little clearer then on who he is by saying, well, the immaterial soul or mind has certain processes going on within it. Now here Descartes gives what most of us would claim is the case, that we know the body and its attributes, its properties, with much more certainty than we know any properties of an immaterial mind or soul, right? We know the body by our senses. We can get a mental image of the perceptions we have of the body, and yet we don't seem to be able to get a mental image of the self. Now we're going to see that David Hume takes this observation and really runs with it to say, well, if we don't have any internal experience of a continuous self, for Hume, he's going to say, how can we justify the belief that we do continue to exist as the same person, even in this life, much less that we have an immaterial soul that survives the death of the body. But here's the thing. Descartes says, wouldn't this be odd, though, if something whose existence I could doubt, namely that I have a body, I might be dreaming it, an evil genius may be creating these impressions in me, I might be in the Matrix. Descartes says, but wouldn't it be odd that something whose existence we could doubt would be known more truly than the existing immaterial self. So, now we saw that. What did you think of Descartes? Of his heating the wax. Did you get what his point was there? In other words, you take a piece of wax that has various properties, right? Might have a particular color. If it's beeswax, it's kind of yellow. You could thump it, right? If it's cold, might have a particular smell. It has, resistance. It's hard to the touch. But he says you heat it, even if you don't melt it entirely, and all these properties change, right? It's now malleable. Maybe its color isn't the same, doesn't feel the same. So, you see where Descartes is going with this? He's saying, what made me think that the heated wax is the same wax as what I had before? Well, he says, surely it wasn't anything that my senses would tell me, because now all the properties of the wax have changed. So it must be my reason, not my senses, that tells me it's the same wax. In other words, our reason gives us some deep knowledge that even our senses can't give us. Now I told you I have a problem with this. Like when I used to melt chocolate from scratch brownies in a double boiler, if you're sitting there and you just put 2 1-ounce squares, I think they were 1 ounce there, of baker's chocolate in a double boiler, and you're sitting there, kind of watching them melt, and now you got a puddle in the bottom of that boiler, and you say, well, that's the same chocolate as the chocolate that I took out in squares. If you just saw the thing melted, isn't it partly your senses? Maybe entirely your senses that tell you that it's the same, piece of chocolate. But Descartes is convinced, though, that because all the properties of the heated wax are different, and that's even more so with my illustration of the heated piece of chocolate, right? Now you got a puddle, He says it's the mind that perceives the essential nature of the wax. And among the essential features, then, are the ones we saw before, that it and any other material object is located and extended in space, occupies space, to the exclusion of other bodies. But he's convinced that the self is known better than the piece of wax. Any mental activities that confirm the existence of the wax also confirm the existence of the self. Now, Immanuel Kant takes this to incredible levels in his critique of pure reason. But, if I say the wax exists because I see it, well, I have to exist as the perceiver. If I say it exists because I can touch it, well, I have to exist as the person able to touch the wax. Or because, now imagine it, in other words, because I can have a mental image of what the wax looks like that my perception, my eyes give me. That's what he means. Not just imagine that it exists. Well, I have to exist to form a mental image of the wax. So he says, really the immaterial soul is known with more certainty than the material body. And for Descartes, that's essentially what he is. And so, I think we only have a few minutes, but how does he get beyond this? I'm not gonna, I forget how far your book goes. I gotta reread that. I looked at it when I was first given the text. But basically what he does is he looks at this one axiom that he now has. Because the question is, how does he get from the cogito, I think, therefore I am, to getting back other things? Well, it's a really roundabout way. He says, well, what made me know, remember we ended 8:55, not 8:50. He says, what made me know the cogito with certainty? Well, he uses a visual metaphor. Note, that projector is in focus, and the images it presents, like this text, are clear because it's in focus. And note that the letters are distinct from one another. Descartes says, I perceived in the axiom clarity and distinctness. It's a visual metaphor. So he says any necessary truth has this property. And so he asks whether he has any other ideas. And here, to get himself out of a jam, he's got to rely on what innate ideas. The rationalists believe we have some knowledge at birth. And he looks into himself and finds that he has the innate idea of God. And he uses several arguments, one of which is the ontological argument. Another is one with similar Platonic assumptions that somehow his idea of God is so perfect and has so much reality that he can't have caused it in himself, being imperfect, and it didn't come from nothing. The only adequate cause of his innate idea of God is God himself. So Descartes tries to prove the existence of God as perfect and no deceiver. And so from there, he gets back the material world. In other words, if God creates me such that I think there's a table here and there's not, God has somehow created me to be systematically deceived. But if God is no deceiver, then if I think there's a real material table here and I'm not dreaming, I must be right if God is no deceiver. So Descartes gets everything back by this roundabout method of first trying to prove the existence of a God who's no deceiver, who won't deceive him in these other beliefs. And so you say, well, what has changed? Now he's gotten back what he questioned before. Well, what has changed for Descartes is that now these are on a firmer foundation, But the problem is, Descartes' reasoning is circular, and I'm just going to mention this. It's called the Cartesian circle. He needs the existence of a God who's no deceiver to guarantee the truths that he perceives with clarity and distinctness, like the cogito, are necessarily true. But you can say, well, how do I know that a God exists who is no deceiver? And Descartes' answer would be, well, we can prove the existence of God from our necessarily true, clear, and distinct ideas. In other words, the whole thing goes in a circle. He needs these to be necessarily true to prove God's existence. He needs God to be around and be no deceiver to guarantee that these are necessarily true. And so basically, later philosophers rejected Descartes' way of getting us out of the mess, but they accepted his skeptical arguments and the problems associated with it, and that's kind of where the British empiricists start. They're in the egocentric predicament, and because they reject the existence of innate ideas, they don't have Descartes' way out. And basically, British empiricism ultimately ended in human skepticism. Okay, look, have a great weekend, and right? Yes. Oh, wait, no, it's Wednesday. Okay, never mind. You're not my Tuesday, Thursday class. Forget I said that. See you all Friday, and I'm gonna make the British empiricism PowerPoint viewable to you. Thanks a lot for coming.
Is there any way possible to make our grades visible on Blackboard, like our actual updated grades, as far as like the tests and stuff like that? And like
Well, I don't use that function on Blackboard, but I'll tell you what. Take out an email to me to remind me of that, and I can let you know where you stand. And I got to. I always break them down on the thing, but I'll record it. I always record them also in a grade book, and I haven't done that for all of them yet. But if you want to know, I can tell you.
All right.
What I have for you.
Okay, thank you.
Up to now.
Sorry. The oral presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I signed up for like the date for it.
Yeah, and I really haven't asked people to sign up yet, and I'm gonna try to pass around something Tuesday. And I really want people to turn in the bottom of that thing, and you can put a date on that.
Okay.
But I'm gonna pass around something, or else ask people to turn in something, and I'll try as best I can to give people their first choice as far as when they. So people haven't yet chosen dates, even though I meant.
Yeah, and the reflection paper is due next week, right? The 19th.
The 19th.
Yeah. Okay. All right, just making sure.
Yeah. That's kind of so I can have some time over the Thanksgiving break to get them out of the, because I got 24 people in the other intro class who also are doing those, so that I can kind of have them out of the way, for when we get final essays and stuff like that.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to pass around something, I guess Friday, about, I keep on thinking you're Tuesday, Thursday. No, Friday, to maybe sign up.
Okay. All right.
Day.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, take care. Let me shut this step down.